Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 298 with Johannes Voelkner. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at adventure, entrepreneurship, peak performance, metaphysics, and human potential. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can check out derekloudermilk.com for the show notes. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll see that we took an unexpected month off due to the pandemic, but now we're back and it's exciting times. We're hitting 300 episodes this month, May 2020, and I'm doing a countdown on Instagram. Every day, I'm sharing one of my favorite stories from the episodes, from these 300 episodes. So I'm picking my favorite 30, and you'll get to find out a new story, adventure story every day. So if you're like me, stuck at home and can't travel, well, stories are some of the best ways to bring the world to you. All right, today's episode, Johannes Voelkner. He's the founder of Nomad Cruise, which is basically a big business conference at sea. And we recorded this before the pandemic hit. So bear that in mind if you're cringing at the thought of people being stuck on a cruise ship, because he ran this for many, many years before the pandemic hit. And Johannes was one of the original OG digital nomads. He was doing it before digital nomads was a term. You know, myself, I did it for many years. I'm not sure if I'm a digital nomad anymore since I own a house, but I did it for 6 or 7 years. And so he talks about the old days, like almost 20 years ago when there was not really any co-working spaces. So he was meeting people through couch surfing, which, by the way, we've had the founder of couch surfing on. If you want to check out that episode, he would meet people, by taking language courses and kiteboarding and things like that. So Johannes was the founder of the very first Digital Nomads Facebook group. And he was well tapped in, because he was one, to the needs of digital nomads. So he created this very unique business to serve the needs of digital nomads. And through this business conference, like most business conferences, everybody's going to get something. I think he says almost every person has benefited economically by going on these cruises. There's never a better way to make things happen than by meeting with people in person, in the flesh. So you're going to hear all about how he built and runs this business, remotely with a bunch of other digital nomads around the world. And we'll also talk a little bit about the future of the world and work, and how digital nomadism is changing the way that work gets done. And without further ado, here is Johannes Voelkner. Johannes Voelkner, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here today.
And I think we met in Brussels at the Travel Storytelling Festival.
That's actually not true.
No, you weren't there.
No, but we met at the Freedom Fest.
At Freedom, okay. Okay, I knew it was one of those events. Well, I didn't spend a lot of time chatting with you, so I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more today.
Yeah.
And you're the founder of Nomad Cruise. But here's where I'd like to start. Actually, because you've been traveling for a long time and you know so many digital nomads, I'm wondering if you can paint a picture of what digital nomadism, over the last decade, it's this trend that's growing and changing. Maybe could you just give us an overview of what it is and where it's going as a movement or a trend?
Okay, so I started out as a digital nomad when I didn't know what is a digital nomad. I just thought for myself, it makes sense to travel. I had been on the reading the 4-Hour Workweek before, basically, and I got a little bit inspired by the book, and I built a business that allowed me to travel the world, but there was not really the word digital nomad yet. And so basically what happened was that, so I started to travel, and I thought, I'm going to do this working online and traveling, and how it was described in this book. But so in the beginning it felt very lonely, because there was not really many other people who were doing the same thing. And then I saw how, certain things, every year it picked up a little bit more and more people were coming. And what people see today, that you can just go to Bali and meet hundreds of people there. This really just only happened in the last 2-3 years. And what I see right now is that like we're all in this game, but nobody really knows where it's going. Like, does it, like, are people actually going to stop doing this? Is it just that all problems are being solved, like, because it's really hard, like the longer you do it, the more you also miss to have some kind of home base and something like this. So, but also at the other point, traveling and working also becomes a lot easier that you meet people. But like I see, people are running through the same issues doing this thing, and then they are kind of looking for home bases. But on the other hand, there's like so many cool new services and things that are popping up. And I think it's an amazing lifestyle, but it's not just something that you just, jump in and think like, oh, I'm going to have a business, like I'm just going to build a business while traveling the world. So it's a bit more difficult, I think.
And it's definitely something we're running into. We're settling, we've just bought a house in St. Louis and slowing down, and that, probably community and, even if you have a great community online and you're seeing some friends consistently from one place to another, there's something missing. It seems like that's one of the biggest pieces. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why Nomad Cruise, was created.
So why I created it was the reason that I was traveling like by myself in the first few years a lot. And I developed some kind of skills to, I land in Rio de Janeiro and build up my network very quickly by going to couch surfing events and, doing the right things in the time and like going to language courses. That's where you don't just hang out with backpackers. But the thing I always had, the problem that I would build my environment or like my place where, like a city where I would have always loved to live. So I did this in Rio de Janeiro and, in a few other beautiful places in the world. But when it felt really cool being there, then my visa was running out, right? So I just thought, and I realized like when you have nomads, you actually meet them again in different places. So there are some friends that I met in, over 15 countries. And when I saw, there was a cruise going to South America from Europe a few years ago, I basically thought this is a great way that you can bring some nomads onto a cruise ship. They can connect with each other, and then you arrive in South America, and you all know each other already. So when you go to Buenos Aires, when you go to Santiago de Chile, or Rio, then you already have a little network there because you all escaped the winter together. So that was my idea, that, it was more like make it easy to plug in cities and have like some first contact of this. And now what happened is that we had like over 1,300 people on board of the ship. And now you can go to pretty much any nomad hotspot or wherever you want in the world. And there's always someone from the cruise who you can connect to or get touch in. So that was the thing that I wanted to solve, to make it easier for people to connect in places.
And there's something that allowed you to be the one to come up with this idea, to see you could do a solution like this. What about your history or who you are that sort of made it so clear for you?
So I didn't never wanted to become a nomad. I was living in South Africa first, and my problem was that I had my friends in Germany and I needed a way to keep in touch with my friends, and I was actually engaged in South Africa. So I wanted to live in Cape Town, but I also wanted to keep in touch with my friends who were really important to me. And then I took on a job and I had 14 days of vacation and a really bad salary. And I knew, as much as I want to live here and have a future, that is not the way how I can have the future. So then I found out, okay, I need to have an online job, right? So this was my initial thinking. And then when I started to travel, and I was just like one of the first ones who was doing this and who was like really experimenting with this lifestyle. And I just couldn't believe, like, this is amazing. Like, I can be in Rio, I can be in other places, but like, why is no one else here who's working online? Like, is there no one working online and traveling or whatever? Because I just thought this for myself, that it would be nice, like it's nice to go around the world. So then I was the first one to start. I was looking on Facebook and I was like, okay, so once I found the word digital nomad, I looked on Facebook and there was not one single Facebook group for this. So then I created it, and having the first Facebook group with a keyword allowed me to grow this to 5,000, 6,000 members. And then when I had the idea to come up with this cruise, and I put in, like a lot of engagement in that Facebook group, we had 100 people who booked this immediately, right?
Wow, cool.
The first one, you just like sometimes it was a lot about just doing things like that I thought for myself they are right, and I didn't understand why no one else was doing this.
Did you have any experience with boats or cruises before?
No, I had never been on a cruise before in my life, and I'm not a big fan of cruise ships actually in that sense. But I think they're amazing places to build community and really connect people, because you're stuck like in the same space. And so I had never been on a ship before, so I was very, very scared the first time when we went on the boat, because I didn't have much support from the cruise ship company or anything. So it was just a meetup.
Wow. And so you hire a ship from a cruise ship company, and sometimes it's other groups that are using the same ship for other things?
It's not, I don't hire the ship. I have, 200, 300 cabins that we block. So we make up like 25-30% of the ship. We're not complete there, but it doesn't, like, if you tell these people, then they would be like, oh, but I thought it's like only these people. The thing is that we don't make such a big thing out of it, because when you're on the ship, we have private venues. We are like really, we have some wristbands and we have like places where we meet. So you don't really. Yeah, the passengers, they're there, and they're all super nice people as well, but we don't really.
Okay, interesting. So it's like a subgroup within the larger cruise group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, cool. But eventually, it could grow, has the capacity to expand in that sense.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm not really sure whether that is good, because, we're also kind of focused on, taking spots that otherwise wouldn't be taken, like we don't really need to block a whole ship or whatsoever. Like we try to, just fill empty capacities with people. So this is one thing. And the other thing is, I'm not so sure how it will feel to have 2,000 people on of the same community on a ship, because the bigger the group, the more impersonal it gets, and then it's a bit more challenging, for people to meet again and to really build community. I think if you are over 500 people, things get complicated, but there are some ways how I think that we can do it anyways. So, but I need to experiment with this, so we will see.
I'd love to hear some of the interesting stories, like what has come from the cruises, like things that have developed, businesses, initiatives, or just how even the group sort of changes as the cruise progresses. So there's a couple questions. So pick whichever one you want.
Okay, so with businesses, I cannot point into any major business. What I know is a lot of the people who are going on the cruise, they're starting to collaborate and they're just starting to grow their business. I think you can probably ask almost every person who is really doing their online work and has got some clients and stuff on the cruise. They all in some way benefited from being on that cruise. We have Stella, who started a charity in Uganda, and now there are over, I think she has got over 200 kids that are being sent to school. And I think the cruise has got a very, very big part of this. A lot of the cruises are supporters, and Stella got a lot of her ideas and a lot of her input from this cruise. And there are many people are developing together online courses. They are shooting videos together. a lot of things, not this one massive project that I can say like, oh, this is something that everyone knows, like, but the collaboration between the people is crazy, and they visit each other around the world. And like just yesterday, they had a meetup in Bali with over 60 people.
Wow.
So, yeah. So there's a lot of things that come out of it, but in the future will tell a little bit more like how and where it's going to develop.
And how does the vibe of the group, people come on the board and then they start meeting each other, and it's like a week or two that you're at sea or something like that. How long are you at sea?
Yeah, yes, we're like 1 week to even 3 weeks. 17 days was the longest one we had, but usually like around 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does that progress? What does it feel like as the cruise goes on?
Okay, so this is, I think that is one thing that we really understand, and I can almost like say what will happen on what day, like as you connect people. So in the beginning, it all feels a little bit awkward for people, like, oh, so many strangers on the board, on the ship. And the more you talk on the stage and the more, you make the people aware that, hey, we don't know each other all so well. And, let's act like a community. And, and you put in a lot of networking games, like people do pitches, they say for 30 seconds, what is their business. We give a lot of stage presence actually just to the participants. And we really try to, we developed our own little version of Shark Tank, like story shows, talent shows, all these things. So we really empower the people who are going on the ship. And so what changes is that every day you notice how these people feel more like a community. And if you have just 100 people, you reach this, this big step of like where people really feel like a community already after 3 days. If you have 250 people, it just takes 6 days, right? So, but it just really depends. Like, you get this moment where one night everyone is out and just like everyone wants to be together, and then after a while it becomes a little bit more cliquey again, and people need to go a little bit more in their smaller groups. But when you have large groups in general, like there's no end in like meeting interesting people. So some people just go out and do this all the time. But you can really feel every day how the vibe is changing. And the bigger the group, the longer it takes to feel like a community.
Mm-hmm. And when you're on the cruise, like what's your personal day-to-day cycle look like?
So for me, the key has been that I am a little bit independent of, like, I get a bit more independent of the cruise. So I'm more like in the background. I would do one talk and I would do a few more things. And otherwise I would just, point out if I see mistakes, if I see like, oh, we can do this better, make notes, think about, new ways of how we can improve it. But I'm not so much involved in the day-to-day things on the cruise.
That makes sense. And is this your only business endeavor at this point?
Yeah, so there's another card business that eventually allowed me to travel online, to travel the world while working online. So that was like an e-commerce business where I helped my mom to make her product, and it was like therapy cards. She had a depression and she drew down some learnings, which are now being used by like a few thousand therapists in the German-speaking market, and I helped her to make this product really famous. So that was my first online business, and I'm still working, like, involved in this a little bit today. And then I have the cruise, and now we are thinking about more, like, because we had so many people on the ship, we're also thinking about like what else can we do besides the cruise for the community that has met on board. Like now we have a meetup, we have a reunion in Mallorca in May. So where just people come who have been on the cruise, and like how we can, support this community also to grow their business even better, to, connect and all these things. Because I believe, especially these days, it's super important that whatever you do online, you need to have a little bit of a network to go ahead. Like, people need to trust you to buy something from you, or, to work together. And so you can, on the one hand, work together, and on the other hand, grow with each other. Like, someone learns this and they help each other. So I want to do this a little bit more, not just on the cruise, but outside the cruise as well.
And what are some of the other things that you see digital nomads needing, or, besides reunions, like what other things have you considered supporting digital nomads with?
So what I think what digital nomads need is a home base. Yeah. So I think that I have been traveling for 8 years, and I didn't really have one base, one apartment where I could sometimes run back and just fully focus on work. And I believe in a way that this is really important, like that you need to have one base, and that I think it's good to be more like part-time digital nomad, and you go on travels in winter, you get some new inspiration, but you need to have some place, where you spend some time. You don't even need to be there half of the year, but ideally if you have some place and you can rent it out, just where you build your local connections, just like you are doing this now in St. Louis, right? And then when you're ready to discover the world and go on a trip, then you can do this. I think that is the most important thing that digital nomads need. Besides that, I think they need more routines, right? They need to get better focused, and just, get a lot more. The thing is, they're all very freedom driven. So it's good when we are focused a little bit more on our discipline and, getting really things done.
Yeah. A lot of entrepreneurs.
There are thousands of things they need, I think, that nomads need. And I've really, taught all these things myself. And I think they're really important, because like oftentimes we're traveling the world, we're hanging out in these bubbles, and then we forget a little bit about, like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this for 10 more years, I have like no savings. I don't have like a super stable business or anything. That is a little bit my concern about the whole nomad field. And I'm trying to, to help people to realize like all these things.
And I suppose, given your position as the organizer of this cruise and as someone who's been doing it for a while, you're sort of forced into being a leader, a voice in the, probably a lot of digital nomads know you by name. What's your take on that sort of responsibility?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, I don't know, like, so in the beginning, it was a lot about that, like when I came up with the idea for the cruise, I was just always solving my own problems, right? Like, I really wanted to connect to more people. I wanted to do this, and then like I needed to really fix, I built the cruise just in the way of like, I never really wanted to be there on stage or doing all these things, but I just really wanted to build something that I think, that I would love to have, right? Where that makes it easier for people to connect, makes it easier to build friendships, like the people that the amount of people that you meet really in depth on the cruise now is much higher than what I met in my first 4 years as a nomad, right? Because there was hardly anyone there doing this. So I did solve a lot of these things, but it was more like my own problems, and I knew like there's other people. But now I see also other people running into the problems that I had, like even like 2-3 years ago. And I also know, and I'm still learning, but like how to help them and how to, work with these things. So I feel like now I'm not so much responsible anymore to fix my own problems, but like to fix the problems that I see where I can help.
Yeah, I love it. How many digital nomads do you think there are these days, like globally?
It's hard to say. Like, maybe like part-time, 20,000-30,000 or something, like who would call themselves like this. But probably there are millions who want to be there. So I think it's so hard to say, right? Like there are so many now communities popping up, and some people are like very under the radar, and others are. So it's very hard. What do you think? Do you have an idea? Or?
Well, that's what I would have said a few years ago. I guess I was assuming it was more on the several 100,000 these days,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't know. It's yeah. Are you seeing a lot more? We mentioned at the beginning, like these couple events. Are you seeing more specific events for nomads?
So there are a lot of events happening, but like if I look at the events, I always know a lot of people who are going there, and like I'm still very well, I know a lot of the speakers, I know a lot of the, like the main people, and if you think about it, basically, digital nomads means Lisbon, Medellin, Bali, Chiang Mai, now some places in Vietnam, and yeah, like a few more spots. If you look at Australia from a best backpackers point of view, there's like one hotspot after another every 100 kilometers, right?
Yeah.
So at the moment we just have like 6 towns around the world where you can find really nomads versus millions of backpackers who are traveling around the world. So I think that there's like, yeah, it's really small if you look at it in that sense. Like there's not many hotels, hostels, not so many people who cater to this.
In between the cruises, what are you doing? How do you spend your time?
I'm staying now here in Palma in Mallorca quite a bit. I'm focused a lot on work. I used to do a lot more kite surfing. So whenever I was like, I don't know what to do, I'm just gonna go kite surfing, and I did this almost like all the time between the cruises and in the years before. So I would go back to Cape Town where I was living before, or to Brazil or to other beautiful spots around the world, and just go there, kite surf and work. Because usually the wind picks up in the late afternoon, so I can do some work, and I found this was really amazing. But what I was missing a little, like what I like now is I like to learn a lot more. Like I also like to read some books, and I like to focus a bit more. So I don't mind if I can't kite every day.
And I mean, it sounds like it was fairly straightforward for you to fill the cruise because you had that Facebook group. Is it still fairly easy for you to market and sell spots to a cruise and like generate the revenue that way?
It always depends. It always depends on the routes that we have, and it always depends a little bit like how we do it. Like I feel, like now there's like more people who are doing different events around the world, and like so it's not like in the beginning just everyone came to us, right? And now there's like a lot of other options, which is great. I mean, it's good to have like more things happening around the world, and like I don't want someone to fly from all the way to Australia to jump on a cruise ship. Like if they could just go to Bali and meet some people there, right? So it's cool to have all these other things. It's growing a lot, and yeah, but it also always depends a little bit on the route. Like if we're going in November, there's usually more people than when we do something now in spring. It's more like a winter escape versus, like now we're doing one in April. It's going to be a bit lower number, but it's also transatlantic from the US to Lisbon. Not the US, from the Caribbean to Lisbon. But it always depends, like the major time when people leave is usually for the winter escapes in Europe.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And is that Facebook group still going? That original one you talked about?
Yes, it's still going. It's called Global Digital Nomad Network. And yeah, I think now it has like 45,000 members or something like this. We're not doing so much with it at the moment. Like it's just like another, when the groups get so big, they become a little bit impersonal, but it's still around there.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I'm actually curious about you talked about when you would first go to these cities and start building a network by going to language schools. I think that's a That's a really interesting skill to like rebuild community or rebuild a network quickly in a new place. Do you have any other insight into that process?
Yeah, I mean, so what I think in general is like probably if you look at your like you need to find people who are just really in the same situation like you are right now. That is the way where you can connect to people. So when I'm in Rio, I want to find people and I want to stay there for 2 months. I want to find other people who are also new in Rio and also probably spending there only 2 months, right? So the thing is, because always this, then we would be like on the same page when it comes to explore the city, when it comes to, discover the things around it. And oftentimes we also have the same time. So what I found out is that actually what me as a nomad, what I'm doing is very similar to someone who goes to a language school, because like they go away, they go there for 4 hours a day and then they have nothing to do because they don't know many other people in the city as well. Yeah, so the language schools are very similar in that sense to how we are living. So this for me was an easy way to connect, to go there, or like to go to couch surfing meetups, which, sometimes they happen every Thursday. And then you also meet people who are just passing by, but oftentimes they're not staying so long in the city. So wherever you go, think about it like where could be people who are, also maybe even new in the city and they want to live here forever, right? Like maybe there are some other courses that they are doing, or they're going to other types of events where they want to meet people. And it's important to find these people who are kind of, in the same situation.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a course on relationship building, so I'm always asking people who are really good at building relationships what they're doing. And there's this concept of getting in the right room to find the people you want to meet, like where are they? And so that's super cool I wouldn't have even thought of language schools in that sense. I think
also and I mean then it's also about asking, like learning to ask the important questions, right? That you can connect with these people very fast, so that there's like that you're sharing a little bit more and not be too shy, and like really learning this, building like a deeper connection with people immediately. That's also something we do on the cruise, right? Like we give them questions to ask each other so that we really go away from the shallowness of where you're from, and we start immediately just like very easy questions like what are your favorite documentaries and why, or what do you want to get out of this cruise or whatever. But we get people to ask, like, I think this way of connecting with each other is really important. But the problem is, oftentimes people say like, I really want to only connect to the locals, and I think that this is oftentimes really, really difficult, because the locals already have friendships that they have built up for a really long time. And it's very, like, unless you find your partner there, your new partner, then it's very hard to dive into like a local network of people very fast. Like you need just some more time. You need like 2 years. They need to trust you and see like, oh, this person is actually going to stay here in this town.
Yeah, we hired nannies for our kids in a lot of these places, and that seemed to be our connection to the local. Then they would start introducing us to their friends or invite us to their house or something like that. And it was cool because we didn't have that before, necessarily an in with the local community. So I totally know what you're saying. Like sometimes you forget that there are locals even, because you're just seeing your friends from everywhere.
I think it's a shame that we should be like, especially as digital nomads, like we should really aim to connect more to the locals as well. But then we also need to go and try to meet the locals who are also trying to meet new people. Like we're not gonna just meet them anywhere. And like there are some co-working spaces where people really just go for work, but there are other co-working spaces, for example, which are much more social and much more, they have much more community events and stuff. So that's something to also look into. So when I was starting out, there were not so many co-working spaces, so I didn't really use that as a thing. That's why I did the language school thing, right?
Okay. And do you just tour co-working spaces to find out if it's more of a social type one, or how do you decide which one to
go to? I don't go to many like I'm not visiting so many co-working spaces in general, but I'd really like to work also at home. But if I would be in a city, but just by myself, then I would be more likely to go there. Yeah.
What are the most valuable things that you do? Like, what are the unique skill set that it takes to be someone running the Digital Nomad Cruises?
I think that it's a lot about trusting other people and like really understanding what people need. Like, I mean, the first 4 or 5 cruises, I just analyzed like what is actually happening here. And then, I saw the same thing happening again. And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is no coincidence. This is why these things are happening. So I think that is something. And then, like you need to understand that you can't do everything by yourself. And also like basically just trust other people, like that they will do things, and then just be quiet. But also you need to really understand what you're doing there, like what you're doing on the ship, and in the beginning be very much involved in the process, and then hand this over. So these are my things that I'm doing, but like, I mean, we're trying to make this as valuable as possible for everyone in the things that we're teaching there, or that we're teaching similar things. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, like so perfect. But yeah, I think that's my thing. Like I'm just more like in the background observing things and then taking action.
What's an example of something you tried that didn't really work out like you thought it would?
I can tell you that while I'm trying things a lot of times, I think one thing that is really, really hard, and it sounds so easy, is to build a team with a remote, like build a remote team. There are so many things that you need to learn, and there are so many things that sometimes you don't see and then they go wrong. So I've been failing with this many times, but I'm getting better and better every day. So I think that everything just, it's a lot about trial and error and, project management, because like until 5 years ago, I was just working by myself, right? So sometimes I would hire someone for a few hours, but I really needed to learn this. And now on the cruise, sometimes there are like 50 people who are running around, but also the whole preparation and stuff. It's a lot about team building and like leadership. And I've been failing like so many times, but I just think we just need to read books and talk to people who know this better than us.
So a team of 50 employees or 50 Nomad Cruise like organizers.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like with like group leaders and with volunteers and with the core team and stuff. So we had almost 50 people involved there, but usually it's more like up to 20.
But that sounds, like a major festival would have a huge team to put it on also.
Yeah.
What's the core? What's like the long-term team? Like how many people and what are their sort of positions?
So at the moment we're like 5 people. And we have, on the one hand, people who are a bit more like, just doing the tech things and the design, running the whole cruise. So we work a lot with Asana. Asana is a great project management tool. So we build a timeline and how this works, and then we can always like modify it and make it better. That's the theory, right? So, but. Yeah, so then we have one person who's just doing customer support and someone else doing, writing articles and doing this stuff. So it's still quite small.
To sell the tickets, do you have people, is it all online or are there sometimes phone calls involved?
So we did phone calls, and we're now actually not doing it anymore. We used to have an application process for the cruise, but we have decided that we don't really need this, and that we want to focus more on, building, like people need to watch some videos. No one is booking the cruise just because they see some pictures. So there's a bit more of education involved, and then when they're ready, they can book the cruise, and they will know before, like whether this is something that they can identify with or they can't. So we used to have a super complicated application process, and we're just in the process of actually changing this. We might go back to this, but I believe that right now this is the best step to do.
I think it's pretty clear from what you have on your website. You can say like, that's for me, or that's not me at all. It's one of those things where like, if you need it or if you want it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the thing is like there's so much more behind the experience. So people don't often get it on the first thing, but they need to just watch like the documentary, or they need to watch more in-depth videos, and then they can tell like, okay, I like this idea or I don't. It's not necessarily the right thing to use phone calls, but maybe just more as a support. But it's something that we have been testing and trying, and in 1 year I can tell you the real answer, like what is the best way to do it.
Okay. I'll circle back with you on that. What about kids? I've got 2 young kids now. How many kids are on the cruise? What's the demographics?
So there's always a few families, but not so many. It's like 2-3 families on each cruise. They always have a good time. Like, I mean, a lot of them actually came back. They really enjoy it. Usually the demographics are like the majority of people is between 25, 40 years old. And from backpacker to millionaire. So it's very diverse, everything.
Cool. That's awesome. What else would you like to share? I'm going to leave the next question open to where you'd like to take this.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about like people who are thinking, to live remotely or, go into this digital nomad life. I think that there's like amazing possibilities how we can live our life today, but I think that it really takes very well preparation. Like it's not something that we just start from one day. Like I think it's very important that we already have some kind of remote job, or like we go somewhere with the goal to build a business, but we don't just travel and start travel and think like, something, I'm going to get some idea of what I'm going to be doing, because the reality is there's so much new input every day when you travel that your idea might be this day it's this, and tomorrow you have another day of what you want to do with your life, right? So it's really important to have something that that works for you already, and then you make this a little bit better. There are amazing possibilities, but also like I wouldn't recommend anyone to sell their apartment or like to leave everything behind just because they're doing it. Like they really need to ask themselves like, why do you want to travel and work? What is the real reason? Maybe there's something else you want to first fix in your life, like to make the life better where you are right now. If you want to try it, like, take it easy. Like don't overcomplicate things. Test things and don't change your entire life before you go anywhere. The reality is people are in the beginning, they travel quite a lot, and then the more they travel, like the slower the travel gets, the more you will miss, look for communities and look for other things that you're doing. So it's always good when you have some kind of community and some kind of home where you can return. That is, I think, something that I think is important.
Yeah. What are the most common types of business that you see, types of jobs that people are on the cruise?
I would say that if you have 200 people, everyone does something different. Like, it's very hard to say that, you have some people who are doing Amazon businesses, or you have a lot of graphic designers, you have people who are working like doing some consulting or anything, but it's really hard to just say like this is what most people do. Like it's really very diverse with everything.
Interesting. And what do you see, like big picture, what is this going to do for our planet, like humanity as a whole? Like how will this sort of shape the direction of our planet going forward? Do you have any sense of that?
So I think it's very hard to say. It's very hard to say whether people in the end, like they move to new places, or whether they are gonna, return home, where they like what is pulling them more. Because the more you travel, the less you become interested in traveling, and the more you also, value your community or where you're from. What I believe though is that people will leave much more they will leave the cities and they will move to smaller places. So, for example, I'm living in Mallorca. 20 minutes from here by plane is Barcelona. I would be, at the moment in my life, I would have zero interest to move to Barcelona. But until a few years ago, there would have been not really a good way to find any type of job here in Mallorca, because it's like just tourism, so I can work in a hotel, but I can, not do much other things. So but when I go to like big cities like Berlin or, I like to be there, but I also think like it's so noisy. And I believe that, especially if you come like from the countryside or like that's where you grew up, and we all want to keep our lives simple, so that is something that will change, that people will be living more remotely.
I think there's maybe an ideal size. We were in a small village in Portugal, north of Lisbon.
Yeah.
And we were staying at Natalie Sisson's place there, and it was sort of pre-surfing season, and so there was not much community. There's maybe 3,000 people in this village, so it's very, very rural, which was beautiful. But also, there's a lot of amenities that just weren't there. So you need some sort of minimum size, like 20,000 people maybe is a good size, I think, for a town to be in.
Yeah, I think like, or maybe even 100,000, but like something where where you can walk into the nature behind you, like where you're living, where you don't need to, drive like 2 hours until you're like in the forest or something. So also I think big cities, they give you so many options. It's almost like traveling, right? Like, what are you going to do this weekend? Where are you going to go? Which restaurant are you going to check out? And then the whole commuting thing. So I think that, the freedom to do online business will actually make people seeking more communities that are outside of these big cities. And you can see it. You can see it happening in places like in Bali, right? For example, people like this a little bit more village type of things.
You see it a lot with the small mountain towns in the Rockies here, Colorado and Montana.
Right?
They're getting more. They've always been popular, but now they're really getting remote workers. So, well, Johannes, man, it's been really cool chatting with you and having you teach us about the business and all these different aspects. Yeah, where can people find out more about the cruise and about you?
So they can find out about me. Like, I'm not really so open I'm not posting so many things right now, but you can find my profile on Instagram, but it's not so active. In general, you can find more about me and what I do on the Nomad Cruise website. And people are welcome to join or ask questions about it. So they can check this out. Keep in touch and meet in some conferences or somewhere. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, and I hope we get to connect again.
Yeah.
Hope we get to meet up at another conference somewhere.
Yeah, let's do that. I hope so.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.
All right. Wonderful episode with Johannes Voelkner. And, if you found this interesting or if you found it valuable and learned something, then chances are your friends and family will too. So please share it with them. Send them an email about it or share it with them on your social media. And all right, the next episode is going to be with Beth Weinstein. She's a good friend of mine, a fellow entrepreneur, and she's going to be talking about psychedelics and business. How are they connected, and self-expression, and how she grew into this position of hosting one of the biggest psychedelics and purpose and business summits that's ever been. So another exciting episode. That's going to be $2.99. And make sure you turn in to my Instagram this month, May 2020, and I'll be sharing a story every day, one of the top adventure stories from all 300 episodes. So we're doing a countdown. And we're also working on a collection, a sort of an anthology, a book of all the best stories from this podcast. So that's super exciting too. I'll keep you posted on that. All right, that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.